start off with the worst. Number 5. Who do you have as the 5th worst team coming from the draft in round 1?
Well, I have 4 on my list. So by basing it off like adding another team or adding a pick, so I'll probably go your style here because I couldn't find 5 teams that I necessarily hated. But if I have to go with a 5th team that I didn't necessarily agree with the pick at the time, I would have to probably go with Bradbury to the Vikings. And I know this is kind of weird to say because I do agree that they should have picked an offensive lineman. But at that time on the board, I personally feel like they should have probably went with a tackle just because it's more of an impact position. Bradbury's a good player, don't get me wrong, and he's the best center in this draft, definitely. But at number 18, like looking at the board, there's still Dillard there that the Eagles, they had to trade up to get. There is still Howard, who goes in 1 pick after. There is McGarry, who goes in the 1st round. There's still Juwan Taylor, who apparently has a knee issue that is going to be interesting to see in the 2nd round. But in my opinion, the Vikings needed to protect their quarterback in more of a pass protection role, and the tackle to me is still the most important position on the offensive line, and that's a position that I still think they very much need. On the other hand, they have a center in Pat Elflein, who I said yesterday I still feel is a good player, and he can play center. The reason why I didn't necessarily completely hate the pick was because Bradbury now can come in and play center, and they can move Elflein to guard. So they have 2 starters. But, if they would have picked a tackle, they would have had a tackle starter and a center starter regardless. So to me, I would have just preferred to go tackle over the center. But it's really nitpicking more than anything at number 5.
Yeah, I know. I agree. He's going to be on my list. Just as a little bit of a spoiler, I was not a big fan of the pick here. But like you said, at least there is some movability. You can work with that pick. And it looks like obviously the Vikings needed some offensive line help. So any way they can do it, if they're able to move it around, it works for them. So that is your number 5. Let's get into our real teams here because you had the 1 pick for the Vikings. Who do you have at number 4?
Yeah. At number 4, I have the Seattle Seahawks. Okay. Now, it's not because I don't like their pick in the 1st round. I actually really like LJ Collier. I think he's a very solid player who's going to be a really good pro, and I think he can play multiple roles in their defense, whether that's inside or outside. But when it comes to what they did, basically they had 2 first-round picks. They had at 21 and they had at 29. And they traded with Kansas City for Frank Clark. So they lost Frank Clark. That's the first thing. That's the first reason why they're a loser. The second reason they're a loser is because they traded out of the 1st round to gain more picks, and they really didn't get enough, in my opinion. Yep. Like they only got a couple 4ths, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they didn't get a ton there to really trade out of the 1st round. So I would have preferred them just to stick at their picks and pick at their picks and pick players that can impact their team now, then trade into the 2nd round or trade in the 2nd round, get some 4ths. And I don't really love that move. I understand they wanted more picks, but I would have preferred just taking the elite talent in the 1st round.
Yeah, they were coming into the draft with the least amount of picks in the draft, 4, and they had one set up in the 1st round. They decided to get more. I believe they have 9 total in the draft after their trades. So, and they got a 1st round pick. It is a little bit questionable. I'm not the biggest fan of him. We'll talk about it later, but yeah, I could definitely see why the Seahawks are number 4 on this list because they didn't get a big guy. They didn't get like a guy that could have changed their team a little bit quicker, in my opinion. And plus, they lost Frank Clark. That's a big loss. All right, so number 3.
At number 3, I have the Houston Texans. Now, the reason why I have the Houston Texans is because they poorly played the board. I think we all thought that they wanted Andre Dillard, and they weren't able to get that player because the Eagles were able to trade up ahead of them and snatch their player, so that they ended up going with the 2nd best guy that they wanted in Titus Howard. Now, is that really a terrible thing that they got Titus Howard instead of Andre Dillard? No, not necessarily. But it seemed like everybody was saying they wanted Dillard. They didn't end up getting him just because they poorly misplayed how the board was going to play for them. So that's really why I have them at number 3. They still got the position of need, but they sort of had to reach for that position of need instead of getting a player that would have been a value at number 23.
Yeah, absolutely agree. When we were talking about the Eagles getting Dillard, we thought it was a great decision. It was going to be the next replacement for Jason Peters, who's probably going to retire, we think, after next season. So that was a great replacement. And in doing so, it kind of screwed what the Texans were able to get because they thought it was going to be in their laps, and a team just came right out of nowhere to get him. So that sucks. Decent player, but not as good as what we think Dillard is going to be. So
Exactly.
I agree with number 3 here. And number 2.
At number 2, despite liking some of their picks and not liking others, the Oakland Raiders, because I think first off, number 4, getting Clelin Ferrell is a reach and a half. Okay, I understand why they made the pick, and also watching the aftermath, watching the Instagram videos of him crying and Mike Mayock talking to him, that softens me up on it because, I mean, this kid, from everything I've heard, is he's a really hard worker. He's going to be great for the team. He's going to be a great leader for them. He's going to, he's going to come in and be a player that they want to mold their franchise around, and that's the way they want their franchise to be. And that is the positive to what the Raiders did on draft day, is they got players that are going to be personality-wise going to be very good for them. Their character is very high. So that's a positive if you're looking at the bright side. But getting Clelin Ferrell at number 4 instead of just looking at the names that they could have potentially got. They could have got Devin White. They could have got Josh Allen. They could have got Ed Oliver. Any of these players I would have preferred at this pick over Clelin Ferrell. Speaking of that, I think he's the third best, arguably the second best on Clemson. He's not even the best player that played on his own defense last year. And I don't know if he's like sixth best edge rusher. I ranked him 6th best, and he goes 4th overall. So I really didn't like the value of that pick, even though I like the player. And if he would have went later in the first round, I probably would have liked the pick. At number 4, it just doesn't make sense to me when you have all those other talented, probably more for sure, like stud players. I understand that a lot of people think that Ferrell is going to be like this, like for sure thing, and he's going to be like a good player, but there was a chance to get a potentially great player. Like Devin White has the potential to be great. Josh Allen has the potential to be great. Ed Oliver has the potential to be awesome. So you have these players that could have been excellent at number 4 with maybe slightly more risk, but Ferrell doesn't have that ceiling that these other guys have. So that's the first thing. Now, the second pick was at number 24, Josh Jacobs. I don't understand picking a running back at 24 when I don't like the value of this pick. I think Jacobs is a good player. I don't know if he's a great running back. So I only take great running backs at this spot because when you really look at it, I mean, nobody looked like they wanted to take a running back. He could have potentially fell to the 2nd round. So I don't think the value of this pick, when they could have potentially addressed multiple other needs on their team, like let's say they could have addressed the corner position, they could have addressed the linebacker position, like they could have addressed the offensive line, they could have addressed a lot of different positions that may have helped them a little bit more than getting a running back. And I understand John Gruden loves the running back position. He loves having a guy like Josh Jacobs who can do a lot of different things in the passing game and the running game and all that. And I think Jacobs is a good player, again. But I just think the value of a running back at 24 when he potentially would have been there a little bit, probably early in the 2nd round, I don't really understand that. And then at 27, this is the pick I like the most because I think Jonathan Abram is a huge character player. He is really hardworking. He is just a leader, and he sets a tone for a defense. The thing I don't like about it is that he's potentially a player that's an in-box safety that maybe doesn't have the flexibility of some of these other safeties that are in the draft, but I still think that he's going to be a really good player, and I want to see how they use him more than anything, if he's going to be strictly a safety or if he's going to be a linebacker. Or more of a linebacker on 3rd down. The thing that I don't like about it, again, is they have a safety position that I felt was one of the stronger ones on their team. So maybe there were needs there that they could have potentially addressed, like the corner position, for example, that is a little bit weaker that they could have picked. But overall, the Raiders are a loser, but I think that the Raiders have some good in these picks, but also more bad. So that's why they're on the loser list.
Yeah, the Raiders are a very complicated team for me to evaluate here. We talked about Clelin Ferrell, and again, when we now analyze these guys, it's not like a personal thing. When we see the video of him crying and all that, like that's great to see. He has a lot of emotion for football. We're judging it based on what we think he's going to do in the game and how we redrafted and
But I think that is a positive though, because
Oh, it
like
is.
I think he's a player that is gonna work really hard. So when you work really hard in the NFL, there's players that come to the NFL that don't work hard and they don't end up being good.
Oh yeah.
But in his case, if he works hard, he can be good. It's simple
Yeah.
as that sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about the effort sometimes. That being said, when we thought about it at 4, it was quite the stretch. We said it could be the second, even third best defensive lineman on his own team, and he's getting here at number 4. A little bit questionable. But obviously the Raiders thought they were going to get their guy because they were talking about shaking up the draft, and that was one way to do it. Josh Jacobs, I think, is a good running back. I think he's solid. But the thing is as well, like you brought up, he could have been there in the second round. I don't know. Maybe the Eagles would have been the other team I would have discussed. Maybe that would have gotten a running back, but they obviously got Dillard. So there could have been some reasons as to why they got him here at 24. But I still think it's a decent pick. And I like Abram here at 27. So I'm not totally mad about it. I think more of the first pick really bothered me more than 2 and 3. And at number 1, won't be surprised at all when I hear number 1, but go ahead and reveal who you
The
got.
New York Football Giants.
There we
That
go.
is who is number 1. And there is probably one reason and one reason only, but there is more than one reason. Okay, Daniel Jones is the number 1 reason at number 6. And I know Dylan actually liked Daniel Jones. He ranked him as his 3rd best quarterback in this draft. Just fair enough. The thing is, you don't pick Daniel Jones at number 6. And the thing we were talking about last night is it's weird to have a quarterback that gets picked 6th overall when nobody in the NFL community thinks he is worth that pick. Not the NFL, not the NFL players, not the NFL scouts, not the analytic guys, not the fans. Nobody sees the potential of a number 6 overall pick in Daniel Jones. So that's the first thing. Second thing, I think he was my 4th best quarterback in the draft. So that being said, I think he is a late second round pick, and you get him 6th overall. I think there's too much built on the fact that he was in a great system and he could, throw the ball for 5-yard outs all the time. He looks like a quarterback, which is a great thing, but I just don't understand the fact of getting Daniel Jones here at number 6 when a guy like Josh Allen fell to that spot that you could have had that would have addressed a major need on your team. You could have also had a huge impact player like Ed Oliver on your team. You could have went a number of different directions that I would have felt would have been better than going Daniel Jones. And you could have potentially had Daniel Jones at rather your 2nd pick at 17 because no one was going to take him. Or you could have traded back probably, let's say, to 12 or 13 and still been able to take Daniel Jones if that really is your guy. And I understand that point of taking your guy at your pick. I understand it through and through. But there's still an ability to trade back, gain extra leverage, extra picks, and still be able to get your guy if you play your cards right. But the Giants weren't able to do that. Now, everyone knows I hate that pick. But at number 17, Dexter Lawrence, I think, is a good player. But if you really think about it, what the Giants did was they replaced the future of Eli Manning. They replaced Snacks Harrison with Dexter Lawrence. And they replaced, with their last pick, Eli Apple. Did they really get better?
No, not really.
So, like, you really think about it, like Dexter Lawrence, I said, was a unique player because he was the only, 340-pound defensive nose tackle. But he's not really going to be like a disruptive pass rusher. He's more of the run-stuffing variety. So that's why I felt like he would fall back into maybe the later mid-second round. But you could have, I just don't understand this pick when there's other players, and I like him. Again, I like him. But I just don't think that was, first, your biggest need on your defense. And second, it's replacing a player that you're going to have to live up to in Snacks Harrison, who's been known as the best run stuffer in the NFL. So, and then the last pick they got was DeAndre Baker, who I said was my 2nd best corner in the draft. Sure, I don't mind that, and I understand they needed a corner. But again, you're just doing the same thing. Like, you traded that 17th overall pick you got that because you traded Odell Beckham Jr. Let's not forget that. You traded, one of the best receivers of a generation, one of the most electrifying players on offense in the NFL, for Dexter Lawrence, a big nose tackle who's going to stop the run. Like, really, really. And then your last pick, Baker, it's fine. I don't mind it, whatever. But like, I just think the Giants' game plan is way off base, and I think they totally made way more mistakes than they really made correct decisions.
I will say this, though. They probably didn't even get the best corner because Byron Murphy's still on the board, and I still think he's better than DeAndre Baker. So that's one thing. And Greedy Williams is there, too. So, I'll say that as well. I don't really like what they got at 30.
I think at 30, they could have traded back and still got Baker.
Yeah, probably.
Right?
Yeah.
They traded up
to get him. They traded up.
Yes.
They only had 2 picks and got back in there.
They could have probably, if they wanted, they probably could have traded for like the 3rd or 2nd pick in the 2nd round and still got him if they really needed to.
And then even then, there's still 2 or 3 more corners you would have gotten there. Like,
exactly.
If they didn't want to get Baker. Dexter Lawrence, I think will fit well. But like you said, he's just replacing Snacks Harrison, who's a beast. And I don't know how that's going to really fit as well. And then the infamous Daniel Jones pick, which I have so many problems to address there, but I'll address them in my situation. So here's a segue into my top 5 worst list that is just player-wise, and I'll go a little quick here.
Let's hear it with number 5.
All right, at number 5, I had the wrong list. There we go. At number 5, I have Noah Fant for the Broncos. And people will be like, oh, why is this such a bad pick here? I don't think it's terrible. I think the Broncos needed a weapon. And they didn't get a receiver. But they were at the number 10 spot. They traded back, and they got some picks, which is fine. But when I heard the Noah Fant selection, I was like, I don't think it fit them as well as I would want them to. I feel like an offensive lineman would have helped in the situation. I don't think the tight end spot was their number 1 need, especially in the first round. And I just felt like they could have gotten Dillard.
They did trade down to get some more picks, though.
Yeah. Which is why it's at number 5. I feel like they did help themselves later on. I just wasn't entranced with this number 5, with this pick here. Like, I wasn't, like, really loving what the Broncos were trying to set up here, if that makes any sense. I didn't get really set with what they were going. But they need a weapon, so that's why it's here at number 5. And, again, the 5, 4, and 3 I don't hate. I just have problems with them. So that's my number 5 is Noah Fant. Number 4, Garrett Bradbury, the Vikings. You talked about him earlier, so I'll make it a little bit quick. Again, he's a center. You already got a center in Pat Elflein. You're going to have to move Bradbury over. It just kind of is a little confusing. And, again, because of the offensive line talent that was there just a couple of picks after, you would have thought they would have gotten somebody like that as compared to a center, which they kind of already have and is one of their better pieces. I know the offensive line for the Vikings isn't very good. It hasn't been good for years. But getting a center, I don't think really addressed the problem as much as it could have been. I'm glad they got an offensive lineman, which is why they're here at 4, but I don't think Bradbury was the best option based on what he brought us and based on his position. So that's my number 4. Number 3, LJ Collier for the Seahawks, which I think is a good player out of TCU. I think he did pretty well at his position, but I feel like the Seahawks are just losing too much based on it. You talked about all the picks that they had here. They had to get up, so they moved back in the draft to get Collier, which is fine. I really don't feel with it. And plus, Frank Clark is gone, and you're replacing him with this guy who's probably not going to be as good as Frank Clark. I don't know. You got to give it time, but based on what I saw here, I just don't feel so sold on Collier just yet. So Seahawks here at number 3, not mad about it, but still not very happy. I would put them as the worst compared to these other 2, because these other 2 picks, at number 2 and number 1, I didn't mess with at all. Like, these other 3, I'm like, I see where the team's coming from, but I didn't like these picks. At number 2, we got Kellen Farrell, Raiders. I I don't understand it because of all the talent.
I understand that they needed an edge rusher. I just don't understand why.
I don't understand why that was the one they went for, though. I don't understand why they thought that was the biggest piece. And again, the Raiders brought this up a couple weeks ago that they're going to change the draft. So they knew that this was their guy for weeks. They were sold on what Clelin Ferrell was going to give them. And I don't see it as much as the other guys. Again, you had Allen there. You had Ed Oliver. You had so much defensive talent. The only two guys that were selected before him in terms of defense was Nick Bosa and Quinnen Williams, who are great talents, but there's still plenty of stuff on the board. And you went for a guy that was probably going to was projected in the middle of the first round. Pretty big reach for me. And considering that was the Raiders' regular pick, this is the guy they were sold on the most of anybody else. So I didn't buy with it. I still think he can do pretty well. But again, even if he plays fantastically well, there's still going to be questions of like, was it really worth it to go so high to get?
Like, Dilly, what you're basically trying to say is he is going to be solid, but is he going to be great?
Yeah, and that's the big thing, because there's a lot of guys in that first 7 picks where I'm like, man, I'm really sold on their talent level defensively. Like, I really think they.
And 4th overall, you want to get someone who's great.
Yeah, great, borderline Hall of Fame even. That's
like a Pro Bowler. You
right.
want to get a Pro Bowler.
There you go. You want a Pro Bowler. Is Clelin Ferrell going to be a Pro Bowler? I'm not sold on it. And I would rather be sold at number 4 if he's going to be a Pro Bowler than not sold. So that's why he's at number 2. But, of course, we know what number 1 is. I mean, could it be any easier? Daniel Jones, you saw the reaction on my Twitter. If you haven't, you can check it out. Just a little clip for you guys. We were laughing. We were honestly dead out laughing.
That was a pretty good clip.
It was a great clip of us just, like, dumbfounded at what the Giants were doing. Now, I think Dave Gettleman, I don't know what he's on, but he's on something good because he believes in this like crazy.
He was love at first sight after 3 series at the Senior Bowl.
He didn't even know what division Dwayne Haskins played for.
Yeah, that was funny.
He plays for the Big 12? No, he doesn't play for the Big 12. Does it still exist? Yes, it still exists. How do you not know football? By the way, this is also weird. They have drafted the last 3 Senior Bowl MVPs, all quarterbacks, which is very strange to me. I don't know how that's even possible. It was Davis Webb. Yes, the Giants. Davis Webb, Kyle LaLuda.
They put a lot of stock in it, obviously.
Well, the last 2 aren't anything. Davis Webb's already gone.
Davis Webb, the Dragon, or what was it? Was it the Dragon?
The guy that really loved Eli. I'm just going to go with that. I don't know if his nickname.
He had a binder of Eli.
It was a great story, though. I got to say, that was one of the best stories I heard. Kyle LaLuda the year before, which they didn't even want to start him when Eli was struggling. And then now Daniel Jones. Again, you could have had Josh Allen or Ed Oliver and then go get Daniel Jones at 17. Let's look at the teams that were in between, right? Because some people will be like, oh, somebody would have gotten Daniel Jones. Let's look at these teams. The Jaguars, no, because they have Nick Foles. The Lions, no, because they got Matthew Stafford. The Bills, no, because they got Josh Allen, the quarterback. Steelers, no, because they just signed Big Ben to a big contract. I know it's only 2 years, but they're going to wait for a different team. Bengals, no, because even though they are looking for a quarterback, they didn't get Haskins, so it's not like it was that.
Yeah, they could have drafted. I don't think they wanted Daniel Jones.
Yeah, they didn't want to get him.
I don't think anyone else was on. Like, no, but this is even take away the teams that didn't need him. Nobody was going to pick him anyways. Nobody want. How many teams actually believe Daniel Jones was like a first-round pick? Like a top-tier first-round pick?
Oh, honestly only the Giants.
I think it was only the Giants and maybe the Redskins. Maybe.
Well, they got Haskins.
I know, but I'm just saying.
I know they were in the need. They were in the need for a quarterback, but like, I don't know.
That's 2 teams.
2. So you're either getting one or the other. But
they hated Haskins, obviously. And Haskins' reaction to that was hilarious.
Hilarious. He's just like, like you got the phone and everything.
He said it before too. He's like, Daniel Jones. You see that?
Oh, I didn't hear him. No, I didn't see
Oh my God. He was like looking at his phone and he had one earphone off, whatever. And he's like laughing. And then he's like, as the guy says Daniel Jones, he's like, and he rolls his eyes and then he laughs.
That's fantastic. I love it. Even though he might be a Redskin, I enjoy that quite a bit. So, yeah. So my basis on this opinion at number one is that you could have gotten him. No other team was scouting him. Hell, he could have fallen in the second round. I'm going to be perfectly honest. It was a very decent chance he could have fallen in the second round. And I was really anybody scouting Daniel Jones, but yet you couldn't go get Josh Allen or Ed Oliver, a game changer. I know Mike says you get your quarterback, you get the guy you love, but he would have been there. I almost guarantee it. So
Yeah.
that's why I have such a big problem.